Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am your host, Kofi Hayford with DictionBuddy. We're excited today to welcome Gina Morgano to the conversation, and we're excited to have a conversation about self-care and just really taking care of yourself as a singer and all the things that are surrounding that. We welcome you to post any questions, any thoughts, any comments as we go through this interview and have this discussion. If you're viewing live, if you're viewing post discussion, feel free to reach out to us via direct message, email, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you prefer. Without further ado, hello, Gina. How you doing?
Hi, Kofi. Thanks for having me. Doing great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for making time for this conversation. Really looking forward to learning more about you and what you're doing with self-care for singers, and any advice you might have for young singers and just people out in the world who are looking to just better take care of themselves, honestly. And it's already a pretty challenging business, as we know, and it's very easy to neglect the things that you need for yourself. Give us a quick sort of elevator pitch about who you are and your background. I'd love to start there.
Yes. Well, I am a singer and a voice teacher, and I host the Self Care for Singers Facebook group, as well
Hmm.
as the podcast, The Practice Parlor. And
Oh.
my self care journey started all the way when I started singing back in high school.
Hmm.
And I had a lot of personal health issues, and I have over my life that impact singing. And so that's when I really got interested in self care, specifically as a practice for singers.
Interesting. So you said you had some health issues earlier on. I mean, if you're comfortable talking about it, what specifically was going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So on one hand, I feel like I'm so grateful because it was nothing major. And I put that in quotes, right? Like my life
Hmm.
was never in danger. It was nothing traumatic like that. But I've dealt with pretty much everything under the sun that you don't want to deal with as a
Hmm.
singer. So
Okay.
allergies, acid reflux. Um, I had a
Hmm.
cyst on my thyroid. I
Oh wow.
um, deal with a whiplash injury with my neck, TMJ.
Hmm.
I also had cyclical vomiting syndrome, which is something that's not super well known, but
Cyclical
basically,
vomiting. Okay.
yeah, it means that
Huh.
you throw up on a
Hmm.
schedule. So there
Whoa.
was, yeah, there was a
Jeez.
period in my life where I was throwing up a lot. And so you can
Hmm.
imagine like the acid of that in your throat and in your mouth,
Oh
what that
man.
can do.
Yeah, that sounds rough.
So it
Okay.
was just through all of these things that right when I started taking singing seriously, I also
Hmm.
had to learn how to take care of my voice and what voice
Hmm.
care really meant.
Wow. Yeah, I so sympathize with you because I've had issues with acid reflux over the in my past, and yeah, trying to diagnose it can be really, really frustrating while also trying to like balance, what you're learning with your technique and about your voice, because everyone's voice is unique, every instrument is unique. And, as you're also, even when things are normal, your voice is also changing over time. So it's kind of this like constantly moving target you have to try to find. And so I'm curious, like, what's the routine you came up with, and how did you self-diagnose? How did you find the way of treating yourself? Like, just talk about that. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, well, specifically for acid reflux, I was
Hmm.
in college and oh, I forgot to mention I also have chronic sinusitis and major
Ooh,
sinus issues.
wow.
So
My
between
goodness.
allergies,
Hmm.
sinus issues, and acid reflux, phlegm
Hmm.
is a constant friend slash foe in my life.
Oh, sure.
And it's really easy to conflate all those things. As you said, it's
Hmm.
like hard to diagnose. Well, what is it? And
Hmm.
so finally in college, I had somebody, a voice teacher, actually not my voice teacher. It was another voice teacher
Hmm.
who said, you might want to look into this. Maybe it's reflux.
Hmm.
And with reflux, there's two kinds. There is the kind that you feel heartburn with, and then
Hmm.
there's the silent kind, which is what I have, where you don't really feel those heartburn symptoms, but
Hmm.
it goes up past and you get a lot of
Hmm.
phlegm in your throat. Um,
Ah, okay. Okay.
so I ended up seeing a lot of specialists to deal with that.
Hmm.
And I did things such as not eating after 7 p.m.,
Hmm.
elevating my bed, sleeping on my left side. I
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
tried an elimination diet.
Hmm.
Um, something I should preface this self care discussion by saying I'm not a doctor. So please, like,
This is not medical advice.
no. um, but something that's really important, I think, for whatever you're dealing with, but I think
Hmm.
especially for something like reflux, is to get to know your body and like
Mm.
what actually works or doesn't work for you, because there are commonalities, there are general guidelines of like, eat this, don't eat that. But if I didn't eat everything on that list, like, it would leave me pretty
There'd be
much
nothing to eat, right?
yeah. um so, just discovering what actually triggers my reflux. And for me, more than anything, it's stress. Like, more than what I eat, it's just,
Okay.
am I stressed out? So things like that. And
Mm.
if you do it for a period of time, I think with anything, like, you can get yourself back to your equilibrium. So you can reset things. And then once you
Mhm.
reset, you'll have a little bit more freedom. But it's during that period of really like being a detective and figuring out what your body needs and what is getting it off track. That's where
Mhm.
a little bit more work is required on your part.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, it sounds like you went through quite a lot of different sort of A/B testing in a way of trying to figure out what to do. I've heard the same things, elevate your bed, sleep at an angle, lie on your left side, et cetera, et cetera. But lifestyle seems to be also a big contributor to it, right? If you're dealing with a lot of stress in your life, whether it's mental, emotional, stress, financial stress, whatever it is, it can contribute to your body manifesting that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I've realized like the more I handle things that make my life a little bit more, stress free, whether it's financially stress free, mentally, emotionally stress free, it really does help my singing. And it makes me feel a lot more um, in control, right, of my voice versus you know, when you're in a state of constant stress. Like I remember there were a couple of years where I was, singing was a big part of my income, and I was doing some side jobs and things to kind of, make ends meet. And that was some of the most stressful times of my life, where it was actually hard to get my voice to cooperate. And because your sleep is affected, your mental capacity is kind of like taken up by all these other things. Um, so I'm curious, like, where did you end up on the journey then? Like, dealing with acid reflux, what ultimately do you feel has helped you manage it now?
Yeah. Well, I think knowing all of these things that you can do to manage it. It's like a
Hmm.
menu of options to go to. So if I notice my reflux acting up, then I
Hmm.
can sort of go down the list and say,
Hmm.
am I getting myself in a habit of eating really late at night? Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
maybe I need to stop doing that. Or, what have I been eating recently? Are there certain triggering foods that I've been eating a
Hmm.
lot of recently?
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
what's going on in my life right now? So it's really like questioning yourself and your habits to
Hmm.
try to get to the root of it. And now I can do that faster. So
Cool.
whereas it had been like really out of control when I was first diagnosed,
Mhm.
Now just a couple of days and I can see, I'm getting a little off track. Let's go back on.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Nice. Yeah, I wound up trying a supplement called like Lily of the Desert. I think that's the name of it. It's something you would take basically after a meal just to help sort of quash the excess acid. But I've also heard theories that, it is a symptom of not enough acidity when you have acid reflux. So I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's quite curious, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of people can make the assumption that if they have acid reflux, they have too much
Hmm.
acid, and then they go through and reduce all this acid out of their diet. And it
Hmm.
actually makes it worse because that
Yeah.
wasn't the problem at all.
Yep, yep, yeah. So it's a little bit of a whack-a-mole kind of situation to figure it out, but eventually you can get to it. And, sometimes it's not acid reflux by itself. It might be that you're also not, technique-wise doing things that your voice needs. So then it gets tired quickly and
Mhm.
other things like, or you're putting too much pressure. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. Um, okay, so acid reflux, that's one thing that a lot of singers deal with. So you also said sinusitis and a few other things. Are those
Mhm.
still things you're managing now, and or is it kind of
Oh,
a
yeah.
thing of the past?
No, 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 for sure. Chronic sinusitis, I
Mhm.
get sinus infections a lot. I have a deviated septum in my
Uh-huh.
nose.
Okay.
So technically I'm a candidate for surgery.
Mhm.
Personally, I'm scared. So that's just my decision. I'm dealing with it. I
Okay.
know a lot of people have had surgery and have had positive
Mhm.
experiences and
Yeah,
results.
I've only heard positive experiences
Yeah.
actually when it comes to that.
But yeah, so I constantly have this feeling of like
Mhm.
massive sinus pressure
Mhm.
and have had to sing with sinus infections a lot because
Mhm.
if I get a cold or anything, it turns into a sinus infection.
Wow, okay. Yeah.
So that was really a lesson in, you mentioned technique. It's really
Mm.
relying on your healthy technique in order to sing because
Mm.
the tendency is to want to push through and to like,
Yeah.
feel the resonance and the vibrations that you're not
Mm.
feeling because you're so clogged up. So you
Yeah.
just send more
Yeah.
air through.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but really trusting your technique and
Mhm.
learning, exercises for opening up your resonance as much as possible and for clearing things out as much as possible so
Mhm.
that you're able to sing when you need to. I think that
Yeah.
also COVID has taught us that, it used to be like the show must go on, you must sing at all
Right.
costs.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think more and more, we're moving in the direction of safety first, of don't get
Mhm.
your castmates sick, of,
Mhm. Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
um, so I think that's good. But if you do have to sing through a
Mhm.
sinus infection or through a cold or something, it's so important that you are singing with your technique and knowing what you have to do from a technical perspective instead of
Mhm.
just trying to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah. There's kind of a fine line between, soldiering on, but also potentially hurting yourself, or getting other people sick. So yeah, you do have to manage, I think, a lot of different things. So, hmm, what advice or what have you learned? If there's anything you could share with the audience about like your experiences with that and how to, maybe diagnose or fix some of those things. Do you have any tips or tricks from your years of practice and experience with this?
Yeah, well, I think every body is literally different, right?
Yeah.
So we all have things that we deal with. I deal with sinus things, whether it be
Hmm.
allergies or reflux or actual sinusitis, like that is
Hmm.
my thing.
Hmm.
But somebody else might deal with like a lot of back pain, or
Hmm.
somebody else might
Yeah.
have another chronic condition, right?
Hmm.
Um, so we each sort of have to know like where our body's at and what it goes to, like what our
Hmm.
tendencies and defaults are, and then learn to
Hmm.
manage that. So
Okay.
for being stuffed up for
Hmm.
sinus infections and stuff, what I noticed for myself is that my voice constantly goes back, right? When you can't feel
Mm.
that resonance, you start talking like this, right?
Yeah.
uh,
Right. Right. Uh-huh.
so when I warm up, I'm constantly doing exercises that open up my resonance and that put my voice in a more forward, brighter, higher placement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing things like facial vibration and lymphatic drainage massage
Hmm.
to try to get things moving, get the sinuses cavities open.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those are
Okay.
things that I do all the
That's good.
time, but somebody else might do something else based on their body habits, their habitual patterns.
Tell me about the facial vibration and other types of things you're doing. What is that? I've never heard of it.
Oh, yes. Okay. So facial vibration is one of my favorite things in the world.
Mm.
It's not in this room. I wish I could grab it and show you my device, but you can
Mm-hmm.
use anything that vibrates. So,
Mm. Okay.
personally, I have something that was designed for skincare,
Mm-hmm.
um, but you take a vibrating device and you put it
Mm-hmm.
on your face
Mm-hmm.
and it vibrates. And I usually put it like right here on the sinus cavities,
Mm-hmm.
my cheeks and my nose, and up on my forehead,
Mm. Okay.
put it on your cheeks. You can even put it on your larynx.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And it really helps to drain the sinuses, to
Mm-hmm.
get things
Okay.
moving. With your larynx, sometimes if I just feel like things are tight, it sort of
Mm-hmm.
adds just a little bit of stimulation that makes things a little more
Yeah.
flexible.
Loosens it up. Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sometimes I use like a body massager on the neck, on the back of the neck, especially in the shoulders, the traps. These areas can get very, very tense. So yeah, those can be very helpful. So
Yeah.
basically, you're applying the same thing to the face, but probably gentler vibrations, and for the purposes of draining, right? Draining
Yes.
the sinuses. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So usually
Do you,
like I oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, no, you go. I'll respond
Um,
after, or I'll respond after.
I'll do it and I'll like sit there with a box of tissues because it will
Mm-hmm.
literally make my nose run or it'll make me
Mm,
sneeze, but it helps open things up.
cool.
So,
That's
yeah.
great. Yeah, I mean, it's like plumbing.
Yeah.
You have to drain it every now and then. And so, what about like neti pots and things like that? Do you typically use those? You can take one with you. And also another thing that's very popular for singers to carry around is like humidifiers, personal humidifiers, and things like that. So, what are your thoughts
Yes.
about them?
Yes. Personally, I use the NeilMed sinus rinse, which is just a specific
Mm,
brand of a
hmm.
nasal irrigation system, very
Yeah.
similar to a neti pot.
Hmm.
Um, I was first recommended that in high school when I was diagnosed with
Hmm.
allergies,
Hmm.
not even for singing, just for allergies.
Yeah.
And I have one on hand. I use one a lot.
Mm.
Probably not as often as it would actually be great for me to use it even more often.
Hmm.
But whenever I feel really stuffed up or when I have to sing, I will use one. The
Cool.
thing to keep in mind is that if you do have a sinus infection or something,
Hmm.
it can actually make things worse if you're too stuffed up. So again, you have to know your body because while it can
Wait, say that again.
if you're too stuffed up,
Hmm.
then it can make things worse because that fluid has nowhere to drain, so it can sort of like back up pressure
Oh.
in your ears.
Okay. Interesting. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
I actually have a device called I think it's a Navage or something. Let me go grab it
mm,
and show you what I mean. Give me 1 second.
great.
Yeah. So it's this thing. You've seen it before?
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, it cost me like $120, which is kind of ridiculous. And you have to buy these very specialized cartridges that go in here. I don't know if you guys can see this. And then, it creates the solution for you. You have to use filtered water, and there's a lot of maintenance and care to it. But that's the device I got to try to help me with some of the sinus post nasal drip that I would have, which was really, really annoying for a very long time. It's not so much an issue anymore, but it's still something that you have to manage because if it happens or you're in rehearsals or at the dress rehearsal or right before the performance and you feel this you know thing going on, you have to be able to deal with it. So there's a kind of like most things, like it's kind of a delicate balance, right? Because
Absolutely.
also I've noticed if I do the neti rinse the day of a performance, I typically have a very awkward feeling. My voice feels a little bit disconnected. But if I do it the day before, the timing of it is enough time for it to sort of rebalance in a sense, so it starts to feel normal again. Do you ever encounter that too?
That is interesting. I do notice that after I use my Neomid sinus rinse, I do feel a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like to use mine in the shower.
Oh,
So I
okay.
also like to warm up in the shower. So I think that helps. Like I'll use it and I'll sing, and
Okay.
I'll use it and I'll sing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it does give you a different feeling. Like if you're stuffed up and you're used to feeling that stuffiness, and then all of a sudden you're a little clearer, it feels different, and there's an adjustment there.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess the shower kind of makes sense because you're also breathing all the steam in, so it's in a humid environment. So in a way, your body's sort of prepped for it. Um, yeah, that's interesting. So what do you think about things like steam rooms and saunas and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of steam in general. Um,
Hmm.
Saunas are great for sweating out the toxins, although I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, so the idea of like sitting there in there with other people.
With other people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Fair enough.
but I love steaming. I love steaming in the shower. I love
Hmm.
just getting a pot of water. And Lush used to make, I don't know if they still do, they used to make these steamer tabs that had some like oil fragrances, or even in the
Hmm.
shower, I'll put some essential oils around the shower.
Okay. Mm.
So that helps to open things up. And
Yeah.
then I have a humidifier that I run every night,
Hmm.
and also a travel steamer
Okay.
for, pre-show, or if I just, it's a
Mm.
facial steamer that they can
Hmm.
use
Hmm.
and really target either breathing in through your nose or your mouth.
Cool. Yeah, actually, those sound. I used to have one of those. I haven't used it in a long time, but you find those to be pretty helpful.
I do. I will say, with all of this stuff, you mentioned if you have some phlegm and you have to sing, you have to know how to deal with that. Um, it's it's true, but with all of this, like, I also want everyone to remember not to make anything a crutch, right?
Hmm.
And I think with steamers in particular, but anything with when it comes to self-care for singers, we can get really hung up on like, I must humidify before every performance. I must use my steamer.
Hmm.
I must use my Neomid sinus rinse. I must
Hmm.
vibrate my
Hmm.
face. And
Right.
it's good to have routines and rituals and know what works
Yeah.
for you.
Hmm.
But also, if you become too dependent on those things,
Hmm.
then that can create anxiety as well, or you might not know
Sure.
how to deal
Yeah,
without
because you miss like one piece of it. It's like, oh, I didn't do my ultra, super duper routine, so I can't sing my best.
it. Yeah.
And also it's also kind of impractical. Like, are you gonna travel with a whole suitcase worth of self care stuff, like your humidifier and your nasal rinse and your facial massage? Like, it's not practical, right? So at some
Right.
point, it has to be what is the most essential. So actually, that brings up an interesting question for you, because you're coming to New York soon for a gig, right? So
Yes.
out of all the things you have that are part of your routine, what are you planning to bring with you to New York, and which are you not going to bring with you?
Oh, that's such a fun question. I will definitely be bringing my facial massager.
Okay.
The one I have actually has 2 sets. There's one with, like, a little thicker ball, and there's one that is, like, more pointy. So, I
Hmm.
bring both of those. Um, I also deal with a lot of tongue tension.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I usually carry some tongue depressors in my
What
bag.
is that?
It's like, when you go to the doctor as a kid and they say,
Hmm.
"Stick out your tongue?" It's
Oh, say
literally
ah, right.
yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And so if you stick your tongue out and say,
Uh-huh.
"Ah," and put one of those tongue depressors down, and you sort of push
Uh-huh.
down on it,
Uh-huh.
and then you'll feel your tongue pushes up on it, and,
Yeah.
that can really help relieve some tongue tension.
So wait, you stick your tongue out and then you
Mhm.
put the depressor and you use it, you pull down, you pull forward, or like how does that work?
Yeah, I usually give this, muscular antagonism feeling, so it's, like,
Mm.
down with the depressor and up with your
Mhm.
tongue, and you're
Yeah.
trying to, like, push the depressor out of the way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Huh. Interesting. So that gets rid of like that tongue root tension that
Mhm.
a lot of singers deal with. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
And then my other thing is
Hmm.
water.
Lots and lots of water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
With
I'm
electrolytes or just normal, just regular ass water?
just regular water. Sometimes if
Mhm,
I'm buying bottled water, I like
mhm.
Essentia that has, a
Yeah, the
neutral
pH and
pH
the
and
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, okay. Mhm,
Um, but that I'm like very, very particular about if I'm flying. Like my first thing
mhm.
I do past security is I go get my water. I make sure when I'm traveling that I have enough water. Like I've been known to ship water from Amazon just so that I know that my water is
Wow,
stocked.
is there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
that's very practical.
yeah, but just making sure that you don't run out, like that you have a bottle
Mhm.
with you that is always full.
Mm, mm. Cool. Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty basic list, actually. Tongue depressor is probably very small, so yeah, that sounds like it'll fit in your toiletries bag,
Yeah.
So nice, nice. So no steamer. You leave the steamer at home unless you're not feeling well, particularly, and then I guess you would bring it.
Yeah, I had a show in New York in December, and
Hmm.
it was a big show. It was a solo holiday concert, and
Hmm.
normally that's something that I would have brought the personal steamer for, a
Hmm.
solo show in December traveling, but I forgot it and, had to do without it, okay.
Hmm.
Not ideal, but it worked, it was fine, and
Hmm.
I don't think I'll bring it on this trip either, like, it's kinda clunky.
Hmm.
I mean, if you need it, bring it, but for me,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Nice. Yeah, I think it's always it's needed when like you're definitely feeling down and you need
Mhm.
something to get you back to that normal. Because like I remember a quote. I don't know who said this. Some famous singer. It was like, most of the time I'm in perfect voice. I'm not on stage. So you have to learn how to manage your voice and your singing when your voice isn't cooperating optimally, right? Because most of the time you're on stage, it's not going to be when your voice is in amazing shape because that's such a small um, segment of your time singing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There are so many variables in life.
Hmm.
You know, how many hours of sleep did you get? What was the traffic
Hmm.
like? What did you eat for lunch?
Yeah,
Like the
exactly.
weather.
Yeah,
Um,
you're arguing with your parents or your boyfriend or
yeah.
like, yeah, yeah.
And it's impossible to account for all of them.
Hmm.
So we just do our best. And
Hmm.
again, it comes down to knowing like your own habitual body patterns and
Hmm.
singing patterns and
Yeah, yeah.
as you said, like just your essentials, like what do you need to function at your best, and try to give yourself that, knowing that there's a lot that's going to be out of your control.
Amen. Amen. Um, I want to take a moment to make sure people know that they can get in touch with you on your website. It's ginamorgano.com. And if you'd like to email her, I'm going to have that just scrolling down the bottom so you can find her there. But lastly, I'm going to also add, she has the socials out there as well. So you can find her at Gina Morgano on Instagram and on Facebook. But she also has a group dedicated to self care for singers. It's actually for singers, so that's a typo down there. And it's a community dedicated to talking about issues like this and beyond. So, another question I have for you is about what sort of books you might have read about these kind of things and how to manage the stress and all these different sort of physical, biological things too. Are there any books you can recommend to the audience?
Oh yes, I love to read. Okay.
Cool.
um Let me start with The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown.
Hmm. Okay.
um I have dealt with and deal with so much perfectionism. I think as singers, it's really easy to fall into the perfectionism trap because we're always aspiring to improve, to grow, to do better. And in this book, Brene Brown explains these different aspects of being imperfect. So she talks
Hmm.
about things like play and authenticity, and it was just a really transformative book for me. And I really
Hmm.
encourage everybody to read it because it really speaks to a lot of aspects of our life that I think we need in order to be well rounded, in order to be healthy mentally and emotionally. Um,
That's great.
yeah.
The gifts of imperfection.
hmm
I found it.
Also,
Yeah, let me wanted to post that
there.
in here. Okay, go
Great,
ahead.
thanks. There is a book called Breath by James Nestor, and that book is all about inhaling through your nose. It's about the power of the breath.
Mm. What's it
And
called? What's the author's name?
James Nestor,
Okay, cool.
and he goes into extreme detail and lots of research, his own personal experiences about breathing. And, we breathe all the time, every day, and we work on our
Hmm.
breathing as singers in our voice lessons and for our
Hmm.
performances. But how often do we think about our breathing when we're not singing, just in our daily
Yeah.
lives?
Okay. And
Um,
how we can use that to like manage our stress levels and increase blood flow to the brain, that kind of thing, and oxygenation to the brain, that kind of thing.
all of that.
Mm.
And then, you know, for me, it certainly helped
Mm.
with my singing. It helped with my relaxation. It um, helped me to take better inhalations.
Hmm.
Something that I really believe in terms of self care is, you hear all the time, your body is your instrument.
Hmm.
What we do in our daily life affects our singing. So it's
Yeah.
really easy for singers to think that they are practicing when they are having a practice session or they're having a
Mm.
rehearsal or they're having a voice lesson. But like
Hmm.
as I'm sitting here talking with you, what is my posture like? What kind of breaths
Right.
am I taking? What is my speaking resonance?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So we can
Mm.
practice throughout the day, throughout our lives without actually needing to sing a song.
Hmm. That's actually very interesting. Yeah, it's good habits, right?
Yeah.
And reinforcing them and realizing. I actually you reminded me of a quote that I heard in one of Jerome Hines' books, where he basically said that one of the vocal issues he was dealing with had nothing to do with his singing, and it had everything to do with his speaking and how he was using his voice in speech. And so there's definitely something to be said about how you speak because, frankly, you use your voice speaking far more than you do singing. Even if you're a full time opera singer, the way you use your voice when you speak is paramount to vocal health moving forward. So, the correct sort of speech patterns there and um, yeah, speech posture and all of that is quite important. So, that's great. Excellent, excellent point.
Yeah. Let me give you one more book. I could go on.
Hmm.
If anybody
Yeah,
wants
sure.
more books, email me and I'll give you a big long list.
Yeah, sounds good.
I recently read a book called Everyday Vitality by Dr. Samantha Boardman. And
How do you spell her last name?
it's Boardman. I believe it's Boardman. I can look it up
Okay.
and be sure. Um, so she goes into a lot of different things for, living a healthy, energized life. But the second half of the book in particular really stood out to me because she talks about the importance of relationships.
Hmm.
And when we talk about self care, yes,
Mhm.
it's Boardman. When we
Yeah.
talk about self care, self is in it,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And so we're thinking about like how to take care of ourselves,
Mhm.
which sometimes can seem selfish because
Mhm.
other people aren't in that equation.
Yeah.
But she brings other people into the equation and she
Okay.
talks about connection being an
Hmm.
important part of self care.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, I love this book for that reason in particular. I think as singers, at least I know that I am a huge introvert and
Mhm.
I'm huge on learning and personal growth. And it's really easy
Yeah.
for me. And I know for some of my singer colleagues, throughout my
Mhm.
life, I've seen this is that it's easy just to focus on what you're doing, focus on learning your roles, practicing,
Mhm.
good
Mhm.
grades, doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. And sometimes we forget to leave ample space for our relationships.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
sometimes,
if you're an ambitious person, you're like go go go, and you forget that yeah, it's important to call your friends and check in with people and not work sometimes. Like give yourself the time to recover. Yeah.
yeah. And even like, if I'm feeling down, I
Hmm.
might think, oh, I need to sleep or numb out watching TV or checking social media. But really, I just
Mm.
need to call a friend or text somebody or
Hmm.
make plans to do something with somebody, or, offer to help, be of service. Um,
Hmm.
there's so many ways that we can feel better by helping other people and by engaging with other people.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of wisdom there that it's uh it's a fundamental part of being human actually to have that. So um we're wired to desire those things and to want those things and to need them so that when we do have a lack of that, we do feel like incomplete and also a lack of stability. I think those relationships kind of anchor you and give you a sense of belonging and a sense of home and community, and that is fundamentally important. If you think about the greatest athletes, the greatest singers, a lot of them had at least one or two people who were very core to their lives, right? And they were people that really helped shape them and give them a sense of perspective on life because usually they're older and help them sort of navigate the complexities of life. So having that sort of mentor, that sort of central person, I think it's really, really important. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's an excellent point. Everyday Vitality by Samantha Boardman. All right, cool. These are all things I might add into my Audible wish list and pick them off one by one, over the course of the year. So thanks for the recommendations. Um, Yeah, so we've talked about quite a few different things. Are there any other like thoughts you'd like to share, recommendations, and anything you've learned from running this self care for singers group?
Yes. Okay. Let me answer that last question first.
Hmm.
When people join the group, I ask, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to singer self care?
Hmm.
And I am always not surprised, but um, it's just really, really interesting. I'm fascinated by the fact that everyone's answers are different.
Hmm. Okay.
Again, there are some common things that come up,
Hmm.
things like dealing with allergies or reflux,
Mm.
things like
Hmm.
time management. We can talk about time management.
Mm. Sure.
Um,
Yeah. That's
um,
a big one.
uh, vocal fatigue. There are
Hmm.
common things that come up, common themes and threads, but
Hmm.
for as many people as in that group, I have almost that many different responses.
Hmm.
And I think that just goes to show how individual self-care really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it comes down to, the basics, like how was your mental health? Are you getting enough sleep? What are you eating? Are you moving your
Hmm.
body? Are you hydrating? Like those things are universal principles
Hmm.
of good
Yeah.
personal hygiene, self-care, but
Hmm. Hmm.
for each person, their own story is unique. And we have to
Sure.
remember that.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that, especially even when it comes to the voice. I think everyone's voice is different. Just like I don't know if you think about body parts, like we all have elbows, we all have knees and hips and all these different joints, right? But they're shaped differently. And the voice, yes, we all have a voice, we all have vocal cords, but I'm sure if you looked at the cartilage and the structure of the vocal cords themselves and the things that connect to it, and the whole architecture and like structure of the voice, I'm sure there's variants. Like just like some people have, double locking elbows. Some people have the knees that are slightly, more outward or more inward, So that's why I think when it comes to technique, because we don't get to see the instrument and then also know what the correlation between an instrument's like physical, look is to what a sound, correlation is to that, physical characteristic. It's not a one size fits all. You have to basically figure out what works for you. Um, and I think it's just like that with self care. Some people need 8 hours of sleep no matter what. Some people can operate on 4 or 5 hours of sleep and be fine. So yeah, we're all wired differently, so we do need to have a unique approach to um, our bodies, really.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I mentioned time management, and I do want to
Yeah,
touch
let's
on
touch
that.
on that. Yeah, yeah.
So in the group, people often mention struggling to find time to practice,
Mm-hmm.
um, struggling to find time to balance it all in their lives, to be a mom and a musician and
Mm-hmm.
maybe have a full-time job or a side job or teach or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I used to not necessarily think that time management was part of self-care. Like I thought it was something different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I truly believe that it is integral to our self-care.
Mm, okay.
It's really easy to overschedule yourself. I'm very guilty of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Guilty as charged. Or it's not charged, but yeah, I totally agree.
it's easy to become distracted or to put our time into things that maybe aren't truly our deepest priorities or that
Mhm.
don't move the needle forward in the way that we want to progress.
Mhm.
Um, and that can leave us feeling really stressed. It can leave us
Mhm.
feeling mentally fatigued and down. It can leave us physically stressed in our bodies. I remember in New York, I was just running around like crazy from lesson to lesson and rehearsal to gig and,
Yeah.
barely leaving myself time to eat, barely leaving
Mhm.
myself time to sit down. I was huffing and puffing, just running places. And the way we manage our time really just has a huge impact on all of the other aspects of our self-care and of our lives,
Yeah.
really.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I can't agree with you more. I remember, like, as I was telling you, when I was working as a singer mostly for a couple of years, and then having a couple side gigs and managing all that. I mean, I was pretty miserable because I had to run around doing a myriad of different things, just trying to put it all together. And time management was an important part of that. But even though I was doing the best I could with managing three different essentially jobs, it was kind of a nightmare, and it really brought to question whether this lifestyle is something I want, and something I want to continue doing. So yeah, I think it's very important for singers to realize that there's a cost to every commitment that you make, and everything that you want costs something in your time. So figuring out what the priorities are and being able to say no to things or back out of something is like, hey, I thought I could do this, but I can't. So I'm sorry, but I hope you find someone else to do it, just so that you're able to just be a little bit more sane, frankly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so one thing you had mentioned. Oh, do you want to say something?
No, please.
All right. One thing you had mentioned was singers having tough time finding time to practice, and I know you have a podcast called Practice Parlor, so I think it's kind of a natural segue. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so the Practice Parlor started off as a conversation series with
Mm-hmm.
world-class artists about the practices that shape their lives on stage and
Mm.
off.
Okay.
Recently, I've started doing solo episodes as well, so there's a mix of solo
Cool.
episodes and interviews. Um, but, I use the word practice very broadly. So
Mm.
sometimes people are talking about practicing literally in the practice room.
Mm-hmm.
And other times it is talking about something like time management or something like a faith practice or a
Mm-hmm.
practice of connection, practicing your mindset. Um, all of these practices. And again, for me, like they're all part of self care. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a workbook on my website. It's called 12 Essential Practices.
Mm-hmm.
And they're 12 things that I have found to be essential to thrive in both art and life. So there's things like
Mm-hmm.
time management, self awareness, um, practicing your craft. So from the
Mm-hmm.
literal to the more metaphorical, um, and I just really encourage everybody to think of their life as a practice, and your life is your life, right? It's not a
Yeah.
rehearsal, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think there's always the opportunity to go deeper. There's always the opportunity to learn and to grow
Hmm.
and to treat every day as a new experiment to see where you want to go tomorrow. Um,
Right.
to
Okay.
appreciate today for what it is and to try to make the most of it. So that's sort of what the podcast is about. And then
Hmm.
there's a workbook to go along with that if anyone's interested.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So that can be found on your website, I guess, or
Yes. Mhm.
okay. Cool. So, uh, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody, go to Gina's website to learn more about her and what she's got to offer through this Practice Parlor podcast and the Self Care for Singers community. I highly encourage you all to join and contribute to the conversation, and maybe you'll learn some very interesting facts and things from other singers that you can use in your daily practice and your daily life. So we're kind of getting towards the tail end of things here on the this interview, but it's been really wonderful having you, Gina, to share what you've been doing to serve the singing community. So I think we need more people like you that are putting out, content, putting out resources, making recommendations with books, and making themselves actually available for these kinds of discussions for the edification of the singing community. So thank you so much for making time. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to share? Any?
Thank you so much for having me, Kofi. Um, yes. So I realized that in this whole conversation, we
Hmm.
haven't actually talked much about taking care of the voice in terms of like
Hmm.
dealing with vocal fatigue or vocal stamina
Yeah.
or things like
Hmm.
that. And on one hand, we could have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
on the other hand, I hope that people take away from this that your self care as a human is your
Hmm.
self care for your voice.
Mm, mm. Okay.
Um, if anybody has any questions more specifically about, if you're getting fatigued really
Hmm.
easily, or if you're having trouble getting through performances, or you're singing songs, you just feel like your throat is hiked up to your ears,
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
usually there are technical things that will
Hmm.
go along with caring for your voice in that respect, or just
Sure.
being mindful of, how frequently you're talking, how loud are you talking, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Um, but in general, I just want to encourage everybody to take care of themselves and to take care of each other, because your voice matters. It truly, truly matters. And it makes a huge impact beyond what you could ever know.
Mm.
So
That's great. Thank you, Gina. Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely one of more than many conversations I think we can have about self care as a general concept. Um, if there's any sort of takeaways you want people to have, I encourage you to, if you have any specific podcasts that you've recorded, if you want to share those on your Facebook or link to them in some way for us to, continue this conversation, maybe you can put it in the comments later. I think that's going to be really key for us to really give something of value to the audience. Um, so, yeah, I think we can wrap it up. And it's really been a pleasure talking to you, Gina. If you, as I said before, if you want to get in contact with her, let me put her email address down on the bottom so you can scroll, so that you can get in touch with her. It's Gina at ginamorgano.com. And you know us at DictionBuddy, just dictionbuddy.com. We've created a system to help singers learn how to sing in different languages more easily. We actually have an exciting update. We just added Norwegian. We have 6 Norwegian songs we've added, some Greek, and more to come. So we're trying to serve the community also in our own way. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll look forward to catching up with you again in the coming weeks on our next podcast. Have a
thank you
wonderful
so much.
Sunday. Thank you, Gina. Okay. Take care, guys. Have a good day. Bye.